Hey everyone, it's Chase here again, and today we're going to be taking a look at some robotic or mech transformation sound design. So I have the clip here. Let's just start by watching it and let you see the final result of what I came up with, and then we'll take a look at some of the interesting props that I recorded. I think, and I'm going by memory here because it was a little while ago that I did work on this. But I believe everything was recorded from scratch. So as we're going through it, I'll mention anything that, wouldn't have been. But we will take a look at all the props. All right, so here is the clip. So again, tank transformation sequence. I'll make it a little bit bigger. All right, so there's that sequence, and let's go ahead and take a look at some of the interesting props here. So leave some time for that. Okay, so jumping into the session here, let's take a look. What I have pulled open in front of me is I actually have, so I've updated to the latest version of Pro Tools, which I know not everyone is on yet, but I have these folder tracks. So I went and organized things into a session, finally using folder tracks in Pro Tools. Now, another note here, you can kind of look at some of these layers that I'll be going over as I say this, but this is pretty likely to be my probably my last video that I'll be doing in Pro Tools. I've switched over to Reaper. Pretty much, I'm going to say I'm about 90% of the way there, and I already have the next project that I'm kind of looking to show you pretty well prepared inside of Reaper. So Reaper seems to be, as far as what we're concerned with a lot of the sound design, especially for game sound, seems to be very popular, and can certainly understand why now. I have a lot of really cool things that I'm excited to demonstrate, a lot of really interesting workflow ideas. So anyway, getting into the project here in front of me, as you can see, this is really all focused on that tank transformation sequence. And I've essentially broken everything down into how many sub layers is this? So we have pneumatics. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we got 7. And if you include the gun, which technically is a separate design process, but we have these 7 core layers. So I've got some pneumatics, gun mechanization. So that's all at the beginning. Servos, and then we have the impact of the foot coming down. And then we have some little metal kind of movements. We have motors, and then we have a track called Vibes. All right. So let's just listen to these one by one, and then I'll break down each section. This video will be perhaps a little bit more focused on the source material than some of the other ones are. I know the Magic design video is very heavily focused on that source material recording, and this one's going to be similar to that. So I don't feel like I'm doing any really crazy processing chains. There's nothing. It's just kind of a little bit different than maybe the last few videos, but it should be a good counterpoint. I think you get a lot out of it in terms of what you can do to be creative with those props. Okay, so pneumatics. Let's take a listen to this. All right, so that's just all the air kind of whooshy type of movements going on there. And maybe gun mech. Let's listen to that. So that's just that part of the beginning where the gun comes out. All right. And you know what? I'm noticing since I haven't worked in Pro Tools a ton lately, but since I've done this upgrade to video engine, I hope I don't jinx it here by saying so, but it does seem better for one reason or another. Servos. So they're just kind of like the fine movements. If I listen with the pneumatics, probably will go nicely. Right, so that's a pretty good idea of what's going on there. Impact. Let's see if we can just go to where that is. Well, right here. All right, so a nice beefy impact on that leg coming down. Little metal, this is just kind of like, actually I don't really remember. Let's see exactly what this is. Okay, so that's strictly for the foot transformation. So there's just some smaller metal pieces. And then there should be, yes, I forgot to bring it out. Here's the big metal pieces. All right, so you put it all together. That's the foot coming apart. You probably can read my notes here and get an idea of already what's going on. Motors. I'm trying to remember how this is different from servos. Oh, I know. This is, I know what this is. Let me back it up. So that's really just the sound of the tank's engine running, so to speak. And what else? Vibes. Okay, so here's, this track is a little interesting. So you can hear that's kind of clearly following the envelope of a lot of everything else that's happening. So I'll definitely get into the design idea about that. Let me pull open my pneumatics tracks. Not really the most efficient way of doing that. Hide the gun. All right, so there we should be able to, more or less, we can see everything pretty well. So here's something that we can think about. Let me play just this beginning part again. Now, in terms of design for this clip, if I'm talking about, you know, the emotional content or, you know, how we're seeing this, you could kind of go maybe a couple of different directions. The tank is, you know, kind of clearly in the background, but it is kind of the focal point as well. So I could have placed some of these sounds more in the back, probably would have been more realistic, but I think you're kind of expected, you should be able to hear what's happening with the tank transforming. It's kind of important, right? This is kind of a dramatic point of the whole somatic. So it's good. I thought it was good to bring that perspective forward so that you are hearing all the details. And I didn't really listen to the original much, to be honest, because I find that if you're doing a redesign and you're listening to the original track, it's going to change how your approach is, and I think there's value to be added sometimes in doing that. But I like to practice and just see how what I do comes out without any kind of preconceived notions. Now, the other thing that stuck out to me was, you know, what is this, like, the situation here? It's pretty dire. I mean, I know we're not really seeing it from the beginning, but there's, you know, a bunch of enemies coming in, and it's kind of, you know, it's a little sketchy for these guys. So to add to that emotional kind of, you know, vibe there, that's what this vibes track was kind of in there doing. It's just, it's actually, I mean, you can see in my comments field, bowed spring. So I put out a whole library of bowed materials not so long ago, a lot of metal, a lot of plastic. So that's just me, you know, running the cello bow across different various material. And some of that had a really kind of interesting rusty sound. And I felt like that really added some extra emotion to the whole sequence. So, you know, anyway, we will talk about that vibe track. I mean, I really said most of what I actually need to say about that one, but we'll go through all these in order. So all right, pneumatics. All right, that's where we are. So pneumatics, we have the tank transformation pneumatic sequence, and this is, there's nothing really crazy going on here, to be completely honest with you. If you look at the folder track, or would it be essentially the aux or the subgroup here, I do have a reverb on there, right? So that's just kind of spatialization. And I guess I've got a compressor on there. So just some functional kind of housekeeping stuff just to kind of glue things together a little bit. But all this is oh man, I'm already doing my new key commands I have set up in Reaper, and I'm screwing myself up. But anyway, this is the air duster. So I recorded this air duster for the Magic demo, but I found that it, worked really well here. And I think that's all that's in here. Let me just double check some of these layers. Oop. Yeah, it's just different takes of the air duster can. I know for sure. Let me zoom in on one of these. Yeah, so I know these have been slowed down with Verispeed, but other than that, no real processing. It's just found that it seemed to work pretty well as was. So now, one of the valuable things, if some of you have seen the video, the Magic sound design video, when I recorded the air duster, I recorded a lot of natural Doppler movements. So I was able to I had enough takes of that were different enough that, I didn't really have to reach for any other kind of airy sounds. I think it's pretty well able to construct something that works decent here with just that. And again, just the reverb on there. So if I bypass that, shouldn't be a huge difference. Right? It just kind of helps to spatialize it a little. Right? And it's pretty subtle. It's just a half-second decay. And the mix, it looks like the mix is pretty high on the wet side, but with a lot of the Sound Toys plugins, that's not... the visualization of how the mix knob works is a little different than how you expect. So really, it's pretty low in the mix, that reverb. So I think not much more to say about that. Let me go ahead and hide it. And then we will bring up the gun mechanization. All right, so we'll hear that again. Okay. All right, now this first layer here, that is a processed version of the salt and pepper shakers. I believe I used Envy, and I don't remember what the original layer was there, but I used Envy on this salt and pepper shaker sound to control the pitch envelope. So I probably went in and did some automated pitch changes, which I can't show you because Envy is an Audio Suite only plugin. But Envy will allow you to automate pitch changes incrementally. So I probably just did that as I felt necessary. But that is just one of those salt and pepper shakers. And actually the last layer here is also that. Now this layer, this engine or motor layer, that is a big garage door or loading. It's a loading dock gate at my the library that I work at. So that loading dock gate, it's always had a really interesting kind of cool sound. So I recorded that and I used that for a bunch of stuff in here. Actually, pitched different ways, Verispeed stretched. It had offered quite a bit. Again, light on the processing. I have little Alter Boy on here. I have it pitched down, so I guess we can hear this if we want to turn those off. So there's just the raw loading dock. And then this, I've got it down about an octave. I'm using the drive knob. Pretty much always use that drive knob on little Alter Boy, at least a little bit. I find it's not a parameter you should ignore more often than not. Right? Off, on. Great. And then Echo Boy, I just felt like it should have a little extra kind of movement to it. I don't believe, did I do, nope. I did, I did some automation with Echo Boy just so that it's not on until the end. I just kind of wanted that to ring out there. Okay, so again, just a delay throw. Just felt like, I don't know, when I was watching it, I felt like I wanted that to kind of carry over or echo a bit. Last layer here, you can see a salt and pepper shaker again. So some nice kind of weird gear type of sound movements. Got a bunch of stuff on there that's inactivated. It's probably things that I tried that ended up not using, or probably alternate versions of other plugins that are on here that are active. So let me turn them off. So here's not with nothing on there. So very clearly you can hear that that is the salt and pepper shaker. Again, with some envy. So I had that following the envelope of one of the other motorized tracks. Cool. And then as far as these plugins go, Decapitator. Right? So I will say Decapitator, you know, it comes up a lot. You know, I can't deny that at all. But in this session, where I'm adding it and why I'm using it is that I wanted, and I'm using it in different ways, different places. So I'm not trying to overuse the distortion. You can see it's probably low in the mix. Well, it's okay in the mix, but I have the drive set reasonably low. Well, I've got the punish knob on too, but in any case, I just wanted these things to sound a little more gritty, right? So a lot of the recordings that I had, fairly, you know, if you listen to it off, you know, it doesn't, the Decapitator just kind of adds a little bit more of personality to the grittiness of what we're seeing in the clip. So just helps to make it more what it is. If that even makes sense, what I just said. Manipulator. So this gives it more, you know, Manipulator is great for sci-fi effects. I've been using it a bunch, and I'm not afraid to use it a bunch because there's a lot of versatility that you can get out of this. So every time you use it, you can, you know, there's all these different controllers. There's the envelope follower. You know, there's so many ways to work with it, and it's so easy to automate by using, you know, all the built-in controls that it's, you know, it's well worth it. So let's see what this guy's doing. So there you can see it's just kind of adding some interesting tonal elements using detune for, you know, multiple voices, and it's got a little bit of a stereo effect. Get the format pushed down and I'm automating it up, which it's hard to see in the interface here, but that the green as it goes up the side that way, that means that the follower is going to push the format up as it follows the envelope. Harmonics, those are up a little bit. Alternator and octave, then basically will flip the sound between multiple octaves, at least is my understanding based on hearing it. But again, you just get, you know, it just totally changes the tone of the sound and makes it a little bit more synthy. Yeah. So if I have a sound and I kind of want to make it sound like like there's a synth inside of it, or if I want that artificial kind of sound, Manipulator's like, that's kind of what I think of in my head. Is it's just you know, allows you to generate some artificial textures from more natural textures pretty easily. If you really want to get carried away, you know, if you're trying to really do some interesting sci-fi characteristics, you could put Manipulator on some recordings, and you could also then layer that up with a instance of Serum, and, you know, use some envelope followers on Serum, and then you could, that would be another direction that I would go in for some sci-fi type of stuff. But yeah, so here is, you know, again, this is my gun mechanization transform. If I'm honest, you know, looking at the whole clip, this section, I'd probably, you know, if I was really going to polish this clip off, I'd probably spend a little more time with this and really define some of it a bit more. But I think what is there gets the idea across. And if I want to continue iterating on that, I could easily do that. There's some good ideas there. And we'll go to Servos. servos. Okay, so this is just all those little movements again, which let me make that fit. Oh, that's everything. So those are the more subtle details that I outlined. Okay, so again, a very well-defined layer amongst the other things like the metal and the motors and so on. There's quite a bit of, man, this is a little wild here. There's quite a bit of processing, at least comparatively to everything we've seen so far. So I have 2 instances of manipulator. And all right, so let's hear it with this off. Come on, come on. There we go. So it's a little bit, my gain staging is a little off, so it may be hard to hear that difference. But this one's subtle. I just, and you can see that, you know, if I manipulator, one is on 9 and the other's on 11. Let's crank those up just for fun. So this is probably one of those things where I liked the tonality of what was going on, and I just got the tonality. I probably had it up, you know, pretty high like this, and then I dialed in the, you know, the parameters, and then I brought it down pretty low. It's probably a better way to A/B it. So let's go here and put that down to 9 now, or maybe a little higher. So it's still in there. You can hear it. It almost becomes a sub layer within the sound, but it's just, again, some tonal stuff to make it a little more interesting. Decapitator again. So this very conservative in terms of wet dry mix. So let's play with that a little bit. So there, if I turn it up all the way. But yeah, just there to give me a little grit, you know, not much. So that's that one. Equalizer. So I have some other very low frequency events happening within this sequence. So the low frequencies that were present in these servos, I did not necessarily need to have anything below, you know, 300 hertz. Just didn't need to be there, so I gutted it out so that everything else in there could, you know, play nicely. So if I turn that off, I mean, you'll see that low frequency information in the context of everything else. It's not what I'm getting out of that sound. I just want some of those movements, and I can do that without those low frequencies. And I have a send out to a reverb. So that's a lot of tracks in here. They're going out to a revibe instance just for the ambience. And there's a couple of different perspective changes, I believe. We might have to get into the mix at another time. The mix, I know I have a ton of automation going on within here, but hopefully this is a good enough overview. Yeah, so servos, these are all, we got some of the salt shaker again in here. So let me just go to those. Right, so pretty cool. No real processing on those at all. Probably some pitch shifting and vary speed. Again, like a lot of the stuff will have, you know, usually has some vary speed processing on it. 3D printer. So this is a recording with 3D printer. So that's another thing at my work. We have a whole fabrication lab. We have a whole bunch of 3D printers, and I've recorded a bunch of them over the years. Right? So we put that all together, get our servo layer. Right? And that is the servos. Again, maybe we take a listen at this point to, it's probably a good place to listen to what we got. So we got pneumatics, the mechanization, and then the servos. All right. So yeah. Again, I'm slipping here a little bit in Pro Tools just because I'm now used to another DAW, and it's pretty amazing how easy it is to totally change, like what you're doing with your key command workflow. You can really change things up when you're trying to go back and forth. So yeah, those 3 layers I'd really call my base layers, just to kind of set up the movement of some of the heavier stuff. So there's like the real small nitty-gritty details, and I tried to get those out of the way first. Next we got impact. So this is the foot impact, I believe. You can see most of these individual effects. You're seeing a lot of tracks, but it's just the way that I had to layer them with the movement. I'm not using a ton of layering here. It's fairly straightforward. Just a lot of pitch vary speed processing to get things into the proper range, and just some light processing. Again, nice counterpoint to some of the more crazy stuff that I have been showing. At least I think a lot of that stuff's been pretty crazy. Okay, so what we have here, we have the cabinet drawer, car hood, car door, so some of the car foley. The trowel scrape here, this is just a library pull. So this is something that I recorded. It's in my metal hits, squeaks, and scrapes. It's a library that I made for myself, but it is one that's also available. Okay, so we can hear kind of sharp impact there. And that was kind of an emotional component. I mean, if we hear it without that, so the impact, right? The impact is, it's fine enough on its own, but I felt that sharp impact kind of added an element of intensity. So it ramped it up a little bit. Especially if you listen to the whole thing. So here's without. So cool enough, but then with that scrape in there, it's just kind of, a little bit more emotive when you have that there. Car door, again, not really any processing on the car door. Right? Most of the dynamics processing for this chain, because you have these transients, so we need to kind of play with how they're going to land a little bit. Most of that's all on the bus, or not the bus, the subgroup or the folder track. Car hood. All right, so again, probably a little vary speed. You can see vary, it's already in the name there too. And embarrassingly enough, a lot of these clips, and they're named like stuff that's like raw right up to the quarter. I went ahead and I kind of had already a good idea of what I needed to do, so I made the video before I officially brought the sounds into my library. But anyways, I'm sure nobody really cares about that. Cabinet drawer, so here's the mic locker. That's actually a pretty cool layer on its own, right? It's got some nice metal clunkiness to it. It's believable, like I'd believe that just by itself. Anything else just, is embellishing it. I did have a spring reverb on this. This is a really cool plugin. I've been using it a lot lately since it came out. On the car hood. Just again, more of like an emotive portion of the design. It's kind of helping that thing to ring out and be as intense and intimidating as it can be. I had a spring down here on this one as well. Right? I'm sure we could hear that though. And as far as the subgroup where the folder is concerned, we have, let's turn the stuff off and see what it's doing for us. Okay, so again, it's pretty fun. It's fine. But then with all my dynamics processing on there, makes it pretty heavy sounding. Subsynth, this is just generally great for when you want to increase or over exaggerate the low frequencies of something, especially when those frequencies aren't really very well present. A lot of stuff did have a lot of low frequency presence, so it was less of that. It's just more of over exaggerating what's happening down there. SPL, transient designer, you know, kind of play with the attack and sustain a little bit. We turn that off. Let's see how that affects it. So it's a little more floppy, a little thicker sounding with it off. With it on, it's a little bit more punchy, which I wanted because there's there's others. I wanted this to be at least a little bit punchy because there's some other things happening in the background at this moment. So I wanted, and you'll see this with some of the automation if we get that far, but here, I wanted some breathing room between that and when the cannon fires, because you have these two extremely loud sounds right next to each other. So I didn't want it just to be like one glob, you know, as far as like the overall design work. So we had to separate that, and that's a lot of what my dynamics were aimed at here. Decapitator, you know, going pretty heavy with the drive. The mix, not so much. Again, just in there to add some tonality. And I don't know, I've got some sends to the reverb. Pretty heavy sends, although I believe these are automated at a certain point. So we'll see about that. But that's your impact, you know. Again, if I just do that cabinet drawer and maybe the trowel scrape, that's kind of the core of it, if I had to say. Right? Everything else, the car stuff, that's kind of adding to the impact there. If I look at the mix, I didn't really adjust much in the... Not much adjustment going on the faders on the track themselves, but I'm sure before a lot of the processing, I probably did some clip gain, you know, changes with these. Glue them together a bit. But that is our impact sound. Okay, so we'll go on to the little metal. So little metal. That is the tripod leg folding out. In fact, the tripod that my phone is on right now recording the video, that's the tripod that I used that you're now hearing inside of this. Lots of little Ultra Boy and Decapitator. All three of these layers are, these are all identical. So each one of these, there's no real layers. It's just the tripod legs occurring at multiple instances in accordance to when you see these things transforming. So this first one here, we can even isolate it. Right? So that's the first unfolding. And then here's the second unfolding. Cool. And then the third bit of unfolding. As it comes down. So that one's a little bit more defined in a different kind of way. And okay, so again, these three layers, they're not additive on top of each other, but I do want to define each one so that they don't all sound the same. So one of the ways I did that, I believe, is Little Ultra Boy. Did I do that with that? No, Little Ultra Boy is the same across the board in terms of pitch shift. But if we look at Decapitator and Decapitator on the first one, you can see I'm using the T style, and you can see how the settings are. And if I go to the next one, it's kind of a different snapshot. So different drive settings, different style. So this is kind of a way, sometimes I'll use when I am using Decapitator, I will change, you know, you can almost think of it as like a clip-based effect. In fact, if I was doing the same design in Reaper, I would use the clip-based effects. So a lot of DAWs I know have clip-based effects. So just so that there's some personality between each one. So it's not the same. Otherwise it would just sound like one big lump of a sound instead of three. In fact, we could probably show you if I turn off Decapitator. Of course, that's affecting my volume considerably, but can I just turn that up for a minute? Hopefully there's no automation. Now, obviously, Decapitator is doing some other work as well, but you can see with it off, it just sounds like one big lumpy sound. And then we turn it back on. Of course, I gotta, go back here and not blow my ears out. It goes around there, whatever. Live with it. So it's subtle, it's not extreme difference. Maybe I could have gone more extreme even, but the point is you want to define those movements so that they, they're not completely static. Little metal, and I'll open big metal. Well, that's a lot more layers, but you'll get the idea here. Big metal. Okay, is that everything? Yes. Terrific. So big metal, there actually is a lot of layers here, and everything that's in here is a drawer sound. So all the drawers and drawer movements, I apologize, I'm moving this video around a lot. It's just kind of in my way. Maybe I close it. So all the drawer movements from that mic locker. Again, similar processing chain. We've got your Decapitator, little altar boy, things changing the pitch and the grittiness, the texture of it, really. Filter Freak, I don't remember what I'm doing here. I think I just wanted to, let me open that back up. Just cutting some of the lows because, again, there's a lot going on here, and I found I was getting some muddiness down there. So I am kind of controlling the low frequencies a little bit with Filter Freak. I think I tried some other experiments with it as well, and I just ended up leaving it on for that purpose. But let's try to break this down, because again, it's all drawer sounds. Let me see what we have. Okay. And then what is these down here? These look all similar. Okay, so all just different drawer type sounds. All right, and so they're all kind of playing into different points of this animation here. And with them all together, we hear this. All right. So I feel that kind of conveys that pretty well. And then with the little metal built in, we can listen to both together again. Very robotic sounding. Very, it's very brutish, very, just sounds kind of rugged. It's kind of scrap metal-y sounding. So again, playing into the kind of the emotion that at least I was taking from this clip. It's things that are a little shaky here, and it's not really a guarantee that they're going to come out of this one based on the huge swarm of the Zerg enemies that are coming in. So make it sound a little bit not in their favor in certain ways like that. I guess this is just layered up. Again, not a ton of processing. I might have done more to define some of these layers, maybe tonally. Probably could have got more into those details a little bit, but I did that with the little metal, and I think probably it ended up carrying most of what I was trying to do. Terrific. So let's go on. We're getting through to the end of it here, or the last home stretch. Motors, not a new surprise in terms of what I used. Actually, yes, a new surprise, right? So this is where I use the Hyperis, which is my back massager for having to sit in a chair all the time. It's always like it's an issue, so I took it to work with me, and this is also the filing cabinet, which we've seen. So that's kind of helping define it's just really just the motor, the engine of the whole thing kind of kind of oscillating. And again, I had the idea of putting the Hyperus is what it's called, back massager, inside the filing cabinet, so that it would be similar in tonality to the drawer movements and some of the other elements. It would have the same kind of feel to it. But I also did experiment taking the massager and putting it on different surfaces. I didn't use any of that here, but that was kind of the idea and why I did that. And having it inside one of the drawers, it moved around quite a bit. And if I had more time to play with it, I can imagine doing some really interesting, movement effects and probably building more material from that to go into a library. The loading dock gate again. So we know what this is already. All right, so that probably in a different context, than the other one. The pitch shifting is a little different and all that type of stuff. Let's go ahead and hide our motors. The vibes track. Okay, so I discussed this already. There's some processing on here, but really it's, I believe what I did is I took all the prior tracks and I did a stereo mix down. And then that stereo mix down, I applied the volume envelope of the stereo mix down of all the other mechanical sounds, or at least a good portion of them. Because again, you can see, if you look there, you see the impact, right? Right? So a lot of the other sounds in here use that envelope to shape the volume envelope, again, using NV of these three layers equally. But all these layers they're nothing more than maybe pitch stretched. And I don't have the original process layers, but here's the bowed metal. Again, just wanted to use that to kind of make the whole thing sound gritty and rickety and play into the emotional aspect of it. Again, I've said that a number of times already, but that's the reason why. So what's on the subgroup? Let's turn it off and see what that does. Right? So it's not ultra transformative, but it is thickening it up a bit. Right, so of course you got some little alter boy with the drive, pitch down, thickening it. Plate reverb, again, kind of mirroring what I used on one of the other layers. I used a similar plate setup. So sometimes I like to, use similar elements across the board to try to tie it all together, and things are very different. Black hole, just in general, you've been watching my series, you kind of, you've seen me use this a good bit. In this case, I am using it more in the sense of, a reverb. I'm using it to kind of darken up the tone here and just, make it sound a little bit more ominous. All right. So this track is like our ominous vibes track. It's kind of the feel I was going for. Filter freak, filtering out some of the low frequencies again, because there was some stuff present there that just wasn't necessary in the context of everything. So just keeping that under control, just a little bit. And then we have a send going out to my reverb track again. And then everything, or all the vibes one more time. Terrific. All right. And then if I turn that off, that is essentially the whole transformation sequence. So let me go back to these. I did have a key command for my subgroups to come out, but it wasn't working properly since I converted everything to a folder track. So now I have to click them manually. All right, so the gun, I'll mute that. But here again is the full sequence. Everything in there. we didn't talk about the gun track. So let me just pull that up. This gun track, again, this was just kind of a bonus, honestly. But so I don't really, you can see there's not, let me pull these layers open. So the gun track is not really heavy in terms of design, okay? And that's because what I have in here, and I know my waveforms are huge. Let me turn those down. I swear I'm not just clipping stuff. It's just, I had the waveform zoomed in there a bit. So these gun sounds, blast 1, you know, and then blast 3. Layer them up. So, you know, you don't see a lot of the design work that I did here, but these were technically something that I pulled from a library that I'm currently working on. I'm working on a bunch of weapon sounds. So those weapon sounds, eventually I'll show you some of that design process because it is pretty cool. A lot of it came from it's completely synthesized. So I synthesized a lot of that from my my Moog rack that you see set up to my right. You may have noticed. So I have a bunch of cool weapon sounds coming that I'm working on, and I had some done. So I'm just like, let's pull them in. But really, I didn't intend on, even when I was building the sequence, I didn't even intend on having that gun blast. But it felt necessary that something should be present, just because it kind of completes this general scene. And I had an alternative here, alternative layer to try. All right, so these are all pretty neat layers. A little similar. One's got a little bit more on the beefier end. But yeah, the gun sound, I did a little decapitator on there to glue things up together, because in terms of perspective, you're pretty close to this gun here, so you would expect it to be pretty loud. And one way of kind of faking it out, being louder than it actually is, especially in contrast to the big foot impact that we just had. I contrast that by adding some extra distortion to the whole thing. So if I turn that off, let me find out where I am exactly. Okay, so we'll hear the foot come down. I've got my decapitator off. Let's see how this is different. Right, so it's fine, but with it on, it just kind of helps to elevate that to a different level than what the footstep is. Come on. Yeah, it's not much, but anything you can do to have a little separation between two pretty loud sounds, helpful. The transient designer, again, probably making that a little punchier. So if I turn these off, see what we get. So that with it off is just pretty blasty, pretty thick. So using that transient designer helps rein it in a bit. And yeah, so that is the mech sequence. I hope that was useful. I took what I did here and I did some further iteration and design based on some of these concepts, just things to add to my personal library. So I will kind of continue down the thread of what I've done and show you some more advanced design ideas that these kind of helped birth. So that will be coming down the pipe in the future. And probably, again, like I said, probably move into Reaper doing a lot of things. So very much looking forward to showing you some of my new ideas in terms of workflow. But yeah, again, as always, check out some of the other videos if you haven't seen them already. And again, things are, with the current situation, things are changing, and I hope everyone's doing well still. And yeah, take care of yourselves, and we will see you again in the next one.